This is the iPhone XS, the smaller version of Apple's latest flagship. And this, well, it's not an iPhone XS, but it almost is. The biggest question we've got on social media is if it's worth it to upgrade between the iPhone X and the iPhone XS. And well, I think that this is just one of those years where it's debatable to even call this an upgrade. I'm Jaime Rivera with Pocketnow, and this is iPhone XS versus iPhone X, brought to you by the geniuses over at Wix. So here's the thing, who remembers the last time that Apple had an S year? I mean, surely the iPhone 6S looked a lot like the 7, and then the 7 looked a lot like the 8, but there were still differences in between these phones. Not significant, but at least not as insignificant as the ones here, up to the point where there's actually no S below the iPhone as Apple has historically done. The iPhone XS is literally identical to its predecessor. The same glass finish, and even if Apple claims that the new one has a stronger glass than the other, there's really no way to prove it. No rating data of the glass was provided. The same stainless steel that, unless you order in gold, will look identical. There's really just a minor movement in the camera hump, which might make your iPhone X case non-compatible, but that's only if the camera cutout is snug to the chassis, which I don't really have a problem with these cases from Mujo, which I really love. You'll also notice that the bottom speaker design is asymmetrical to house another antenna band, and that's about it. Both have the same AMOLED panel that Apple dubs its Super Retina, which means great color tuning even for an OLED. Side by side you won't be able to tell which is which, unless you look close enough to notice that the XS is a tad warmer than the X, even if both displays continue to be my favorite for an iPhone. Apple claims that the speakers on the iPhone XS are superior to those of the X, and I won't say that they're significantly better, but I do notice that the sound is richer on the XS than on the X. But the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 seems to be one of the exceptions. How much this phone demolishes its competition in data speeds. Apple also claims that Face ID is faster and improved on the XS when compared to the X, but after all the testing that I've done, I really cannot tell the difference. I find them both to be just as fast, and I find it fascinating that if you stack both phones side by side and try to unlock them, one will not unlock unless you look at it, and therefore you can't do both at the same time. I tried to do it in video as much as I could, and it's just not possible to show you. Really, where these two phones are dramatically different is on the inside. The iPhone XS sports the first ever 7nm architecture on a chip with its A12 Bionic, meaning more power efficiency and faster performance. It sports more RAM at 4GB versus 3. There's now 512GB of storage options, where the iPhone X only came in 64 and 256 tiers, even though these options are also available on the XS. There's better water resistance at IP68 versus IP67, which is just by a hair. And really the only spot where the iPhone X wins is in having a slightly larger battery, which is compensated by the XS and its new chip architecture. Now, will you be able to tell the difference? Honestly, no. I mean, after iOS 12, it is very difficult. Apple did an amazing job at fine-tuning its mobile operating system, up to the point where even the iPhone 7 Plus performs great. You seriously can glide through menus on either phone just as quick, and features like 3D Touch are standard across the board. This is one of those rare cases where iOS has no differences between the newer model and the older. If the new Memoji is your thing, it'll work on both. All the screen time enhancements that were praised on iOS 12 are here, and honestly about the only thing that I like more about the X is having more wallpaper options when compared to the XS, but that's about it. Even in basics like gaming, telling the difference is very hard. Sure, the iPhone XS has the most advanced processor to date from the architecture perspective, which is slightly noticeable in how fast it launches a game when compared to the X, but really, you won't be able to tell the difference once the fraction of a second is over and you start playing. Now, an interesting thing happened when we decided to put both of these phones to the test when it came to data speeds, as Apple is claiming gigabit LTE speeds on the iPhone XS when compared to the X, and we decided to compare them both on the same T-Mobile network on 57th and 7th here in New York City, and the results weren't actually as great as we were expecting. We ran the test with my buddy David Kogan, and sure, the iPhone XS reached double the data speeds of the X. But once we added the Samsung Galaxy Note 9 to the mix, the Note 9 just destroyed both devices on the test. It's sad, but these Intel modems are really making Apple look bad here. I highly recommend that you watch David's full walkthrough of the iPhone XS for more details at his channel at The Unlocker. And then when it comes to battery life, Apple claims that you're supposed to be getting about an hour more on the XS when compared to the 10, but honestly, I gave them a try, and I will tell you that there are cases where the iPhone X won the comparison. I don't know exactly if it has to do with the tuning of the radios or what's the problem, but honestly, the XS doesn't have great battery life. By the end of the day, you will be looking for a charger with heavy use. The camera comparison is really where the XS is better than the 10. Apple has made some dramatic improvements here, like bringing larger microns to the primary camera and also experimenting with a more enhanced version of HDR. The results are that I do prefer the iPhone XS by a significant margin. I find it faster to take photos, it does a better job at capturing detail and moving subjects, and even if photos are a tad warmer, they are more visually pleasing. Probably the biggest improvement is in dynamic range, which I attribute to the new HDR. And then in low light photography, the XS just demolishes the 10 in far better detail and less noise when it comes to dark scenarios. When it comes to portrait photography, the XS also has controls to edit a photo after you've taken it and adjust the aperture. Sadly, even with this feature coming out of beta, I still don't like portrait photos on either of these phones. Borders are not well determined, and portrait selfies aren't great if you have more than one subject. And speaking of selfies, yes, we did notice that there are some sort of beautifying filters here used by Apple, which the company hasn't really claimed. Not sure if it has to do with the new HDR or that photos are just warmer, but the usual details that the iPhone X would show as shadows are now gone by comparison with the XS. In video recording, the specs are all the same, the capabilities are the same, and the resulting video I notice is quite similar, if not identical. iPhones are still the devices that I recommend most when it comes to camera replacements for video. And this is where I can't really determine a winner unless we had to compare selfie video recording, where I do notice that the iPhone X has a better crop, but then the iPhone XS has better stabilization and far better dynamic range on both videos. But while we reach our conclusion, let me interrupt this video for just 30 seconds to tell you more about our sponsor, Wix. If you're interested in creating a professional website, blog, or online store without any coding knowledge, Wix offers an insane portfolio of tools for you to design something that's right for you. And it's all drag and drop, which is so practical, or you can choose from the hundreds of templates they offer. Learn more about Wix in the links in the description below. To conclude, let's just say that I now understand why Apple is not selling the iPhone X at a lower price than the iPhone XS for a second year. The differences on each device are just so insignificant that it makes no sense to just keep last year's model for another year. If you're considering upgrading between an iPhone X and a XS, I sadly don't suggest it. The hardware's the same, the software's the same, and absolutely everything else is just a meager change. Unless you're valuing things like data speeds, which also depend on where you live, or you value things like better photography, which I will tell you the differences are better with the XS, that's probably the only reason why I would ever change from one to the other. Just don't say that I didn't warn you. If you go for the change, you'll probably notice that it doesn't really feel like an upgrade at all. Folks, just like this, we've got more comparisons in the pipeline, so make sure you follow us on social media and subscribe to both our channels, English and Spanish, for more videos like this one. You can follow me on Twitter, Jaime_Rivera, on Instagram at Jaime Rivera. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like what you saw. I'm Jaime Rivera. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you on the next one.